Welcome to the Peopling Podcast, where we hang out with brilliant human beings who teach us how to be better, well, humans, and decode what makes us tick and click. Inspired by the book Peopling, available on Amazon. Let's get this episode started. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Peopling Podcast. We are so glad that you are here with us today. With the Peopling Podcast, we lean into the simple truth that people matter more than things and connection matters more than perfection. Each conversation here is designed to inspire you, challenge you, and remind you that life is so much better when we get to do it together with intention and kindness. And I am so excited to get to introduce you to our VIP guest today, my friend Rachel Allen. She is the founding executive director for the Peace and Justice Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to creating inclusive, compassionate communities through dialogue, education, and relationship building. And since 2008, Rachel has led PJI to national and even international recognition, including honors from the United Nations and the U.S. Department of Justice. Under her leadership, Peace and Justice Institute developed the Resilience Network. This is partnering with education, business, health, public safety, and government sectors to build a resilient community rooted in prevention, hope, and healing. Rachel's leadership has also been recognized with Orlando's Mayor's Community Building Award. Her organization has received a number of different awards throughout Central Florida, and her work in PJI's principles for how we treat each other is guiding cultures of authenticity, compassion, and belonging. Rachel, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm just ecstatic to get to share you with our audience.
Kristi, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited to get to share your story, your heart. Peace and Justice Institute, that's no joke. And since 2008, you've had a ripple effect through many, many communities, many, many industries and sectors. What led you to this work, and why is that passion so deeply rooted in you?
Well, this work is an outgrowth of my work at the college. I grew up at Valencia College, and I taught a class called What's Love Got to Do with It? I was a humanities teacher, a tenured humanities teacher, and I taught that special topics class because when I got sober, I had an aspiration to be a loving woman. I grew up in a family with a lot of dysfunction, with addiction, alcoholism, and I knew that I wasn't living a good life. I knew that I wasn't the woman that I aspired to be. So I got sober. My highest aspiration was to be a loving woman. And so I realized when you work the 12 steps, the 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message. And so the message I had to carry was what it took to be loving. And that's a lifetime journey. That's not a check the box. That's something I aspire to every day. But I knew I had been taught many things as I faced myself that I could teach to my students. And I knew that I was living a much better life, and that I had learned that love wasn't a gooey feeling like we often see depicted in Hollywood movies, but rather it's a commitment, an action, and something we could learn and cultivate within ourselves. So that's when it was born. And then colleagues were teaching peace. Penny Villegas was teaching peace studies. And I had a dean that said, between your love class and Penny's peace class, I think we have the foundations for a peace program. Let's do it. And so that started in 2008.
My gosh, so two of you birthed this idea together, formulated then out of a classroom, essentially, a nonprofit organization.
Well, we grew up at the college, and we were there for a number of years, 15, 16 years, and we spun off from the community college 2.5 years ago and started it as a nonprofit. So yes, PJI has been a standalone nonprofit since 2022. And, it's just going really, really well. And we're so grateful to be serving the larger community.
Before we dive any deeper into this conversation, I want to take a quick moment to share a tool that has significantly improved my life, and that's called Growth Day. It's like having world-class mentors right in your pocket. There are daily challenges that help grow your confidence, your inspiration, and your drive. Check out the show notes for your link to a free trial, and don't let another moment pass you by without checking out Growth Day. This is extraordinary. So, thank you, first of all, for sharing your very personal story. I know a lot of people listening will be able to really connect and identify with dysfunction and messiness in our upbringing and how that results and shows up in some of our behaviors. And you made a very, very courageous decision. And you're living it. I'm thrilled for you. You're living it. Okay, so Peace and Justice Institute. Tell us a little bit about the principles and where your heart is behind this. And then that's just going to lead us into the impact it's going to have in individuals and in communities.
Well, the work grew up at the college, and one of the things that was happening among us there was a great deal of conflict. But what we noticed was people weren't dealing with conflict openly. It was all being kind of brushed under the rug. But when you're in a work situation with people year after year, people had been working together 5, 10, 15 years, and there's all this unresolved, unspoken conflict, relationships become extremely dysfunctional. And so we were witnessing that. So we knew that we need to have a better way to deal with conflict. And meanwhile, we were hosting retreats that were really retreats to do some of that inner work, looking inward and reconnecting with our passion for teaching. And so in the retreats, we were using these principles for how we treat each other. And I've got them here on a little card. I know you have the card too, but there are 13 of them, and they invite us to slow down, suspend judgment, and listen deeply, turn to wonder, check our assumptions, and very importantly, to speak our truth. So we recognize that in order to help us learn to navigate conflict more skillfully, where it didn't become a barrier in our relationships, but rather a transformational opportunity for growth, that if we started practicing these principles individually in classrooms and in the campus community, that we would learn this skill and our relationships would be strengthened and the community would be strengthened. And indeed, that happened. So I'm very passionate about these principles, and thousands of people across Central Florida have been introduced to them, are using them, and have allowed them to affect their family culture, their business and office culture, and then even the community culture, as we've faced some tough challenges in Central Florida and use these as a pathway to get us to the other side.
Love this. So, Rachel, I'm going to give you a moment to think about what you would say is probably the most challenging of the principles for people to really start integrating into their life, and then maybe follow that up with what is your favorite, if you were to be able to name just one that's your favorite. But before I ask you to share that, I really want to highlight something here. A lot of us work with the same people for years, if not decades. I see it a lot, especially inside of government institutions, big public companies. And we just have a way of being with each other. You behave this way and I behave that way. And oh, that's just what Kristi does. And that's just how Ralph speaks. And sometimes all of that can just be in the background, but we're not really connected. Really terrible things can happen when conflict isn't addressed, when people don't have that opportunity. You said one of the principles is to speak your truth. Like, hey, Rachel, the way you called me out in front of everybody at that meeting made me feel a little uncomfortable. Can we talk about what just happened instead of me just ignoring it, right? A lot of people won't even attempt to have a conversation because, just like you said, it's a skill that has to be developed. So I think right now our listeners are really leaning in, going, "Oh gosh, yes, conflict is a problem in my workplace, and I need more from you." So what do you think is the top most challenging principle for somebody to start implementing into their life?
These work together. And whenever we talk to a group about maybe adopting some of them, they'll inherently say, well, I think we need to adopt them all because they do work together. I think one of the most challenging ones for me and many people is listen deeply. I think getting to the place where we can quiet down the noise that's in our heads, just what you said, the bias and assumptions that we might have about another person, even just by looking at them when they walk in the room, or certainly by having worked with them for a long time. They're just all of these automatic assumptions, or what we could call a bias. So, in order to calm our mind, slow down, suspend all that judgment, and just listen to a person, I think it creates, well, first of all, it's hard to do. It takes a lot of self discipline. But when we do it, big things can happen. We might actually hear that person saying something that we didn't expect them to say. It's not something they've said in the past. And I think what I continue to witness is that people change. And if I can actually slow down and listen to a person and not be thinking about what I'm going to say back, but really try to hear them. And even what the principle says, listen for the feelings beneath the words, I have a better opportunity of connecting with that person. And I think too, the listening also begins with ourselves, because these principles aren't just for interpersonal relationships. I think the primary relationship is with ourself. So that each day, what we call it a daily peace practice, to slow down and get in touch with what's going on with ourselves. And that means just listening to the feelings we're having, being aware, is there something that's agitating us or that we're afraid of? Because the more I can know myself and listen to myself, the greater capacity I'll have to listen to the other person, to someone else, and to even have a desire to get to know them.
I love that. I think one of the principles you had spotlighted just a few moments ago was trying to restrain judgment, come from that place of curiosity. Would you mind taking just a moment and reading just the principles, and then we can unpack a couple. We won't have time for all of that today, but we can unpack a couple that could be maybe the most impactful for conflict resolution.
Well, I think in order to have a conflict, one of the most important ones is to practice slowing down. Simply, the speed of modern life can cause violent damage to the soul. That's what it says in the principle. By intentionally practicing slowing down, we strengthen our ability to extend nonviolence to others and to ourselves. Working through conflict invites us to slow down and really think about what's going on. Oftentimes, when there's a conflict, we kind of just go at it. And that's with our reaction, with our judgment, and with our emotion. And so, in order to skillfully navigate through a conflict, one of the teachers I had a long time ago said, really, it's 70% pen to paper. We have to sit down and think about what's really going on. What am I feeling? What's been said? How am I reacting? What am I hoping for? What's my desired outcome? We need to get clear about that. And as you said earlier, you articulated a conflict that might happen at work, but what am I feeling? Because people respond so much better when we can let them know how it makes us feel. I feel hurt. I feel judged. I feel unseen. I feel taken advantage of. People can hear that more so than, I feel like you're a jerk. I feel like you did this, you did that. So that doesn't often go well in a conflict when I point my finger and tell them what they did.
Makes me feel defensive.
Right. But
Yeah.
when I can say something like, I felt hurt with what happened last night at dinner, or I felt unheard, unseen, and I wonder if we could revisit this. That the other person is more likely to be open to that kind of interaction than me accusing them of a behavior that I didn't like.
And I've noticed that what I say and what others hear are often two very vastly different things. And so sometimes the intention gets lost or filtered through that bias filter that we have against that person, or maybe just from my own upbringing. If I had a parent that punished me for asking questions, but my way of being is just, I'm a curious child, and that was a problem in my home. Coming and asking questions as an adult in the workplace might take a lot of courage and boldness to show up that way, but that boss might still hear them like, why are you questioning me? Or, whatever kind of filter they might put that through in a defensive matter. So I love how you're talking about the feeling part and owning that feeling like, hey, this is showing up for me because of this. Can we talk about that instead of the finger pointing? I love that. So what's the biggest struggle that people have in the area of any one of these principles, if you just want to land on one, or the overall weight of it?
Well, I mean, I I would imagine most people's biggest struggle is just to practice and
Mhm.
have faith that if I practice these, I will see a change in behavior. Because I think a lot of times we might tell ourselves that this is just the way I am. Well, there are parts of my personality that have persisted over the decades of my life. I've definitely changed. I've developed skills, I've learned ways of being with people that have made my relationships much more meaningful, much more intimate and authentic. So I think the challenge is just to believe in change. And they say we can create habits within about 21 days of practicing. So if I were to take one of these principles and practice one a week and do them over the 13 weeks that would take, things would be different in my life. And that we know for sure. So I think the promise of change is really, really so encouraging and hopeful. And I'll tell you something that I've changed in recently. I've been exposed to a practice of mirror listening, which is a really, really powerful practice. So if you were to speak something to me, then I would say, well, Kristi, let me just clarify. This is what I hear you saying. And then to mirror it back point by point and to say, did I get that? And then you could clarify, and I could say, is there anything more? And you would add, and I would mirror. So this is a practice called mirror listening. It's a form of therapy, imagotherapy. But what I've noticed in my intimate relationship with my partner, we've learned over the years, and it didn't happen overnight, it happened with practice, that when a conflict rises up, and we can feel it, right? When we're in a conflict, we've learned now to kind of default to this mirror listening, which is kind of a constructed way of talking. It's awkward. It's not natural, but I can say, so what I hear you saying is, and I mirror it back and I say, did I get it? And sometimes he'll say, no, that's not what I'm saying. Oh, can you clarify for me? And he'll clarify and I'll mirror back. Is that what you're saying? And he'll say, yes, that's it. And so then I'll review. So what I hear you saying is, and I summarize, what I've noticed is it settles the conflict because most often people just want to feel heard. And it isn't that I have to agree with him because frankly, sometimes I don't agree with him. But if I'm willing to listen and mirror it back and then say, well, that makes sense. He feels heard. And so that defensiveness that we had in this discussion kind of melts away. And then we're able to just move on or keep talking about it. Whereas in the past, it would have been a fight, an argument, and then a silencing and a distancing. And that is not fun.
A lot of times it just gets, swept under the rug and never really addressed. It just kind of lingers in the background. And then that could create a space in between that intimacy, that emotional connection, because it's unresolved, right? What I love about
Absolutely.
that, Rachel, is you're actually helping in this example with your partner, you're actually helping him to get clarity on what he's experiencing and feeling. You may have mirrored back exactly what he said, but when he hears it repeated back, he's like, well, that's not really in his mind, right? That's not really what I'm feeling, and that's not really what I'm thinking, even though that's what he said. So it's funny because sometimes when we come right out of the gate with something, it's more of like a symptom, and we almost have to like work through those layers. And so what a beautiful gift you're giving each other to be able to pause, allow that time and that space to have that kind of that adult conversation. Just to your point, it's unnatural, but man, you sleep better at night, right? Like you're no longer like given the cold shoulder or going to bed upset. I understand why you see it that way. I understand how you feel that way. Just that acknowledgement is extraordinary. So if we
Well,
can
yeah.
go ahead, please, please.
Well, we get to know each other better. And that understanding of one another grows. And so therefore the relationship, the love, the commitment grows instead of unresolved conflict, just as you said, building these wedges and these gaps between us. And I want to say that this is not easy to do. Because when a person is speaking their truth and we're trying to mirror it back, it's easy to get triggered, to feel defensive. Well, that's not what I thought. That's not what I mean. So if I become triggered, it can be hard to listen. Listening and mirroring is not easy to do. But the way to get there is to practice the principles. So we're practiced at slowing down, respecting silence, listening deeply. These principles give us the capacity to listen, to mirror, and then to be able to say, even if we disagree deeply with what they've said, we can say authentically, well, that makes sense. For you, given what you've told me about yourself, what's important to you, and what's happening, what you've said to me makes sense. And then a person feels seen and heard. And that's just the number one thing that we're wanting in this lifetime, just to feel seen and heard, which really equals feeling loved.
Yes. There's validation and there's belonging in that. I think that's so very, very, very special. So there's a ton of benefits if we get this right. Every holiday season, I hear people saying that, the gift they want to see in this world is peace. And you've actually created the principles that if we start integrating this into our life and how we show up to others, peace and justice now exists. So what would you say the people that go through your retreats and your workshops, your training, your education, what would you say are some of the biggest benefits that they experience? So we've really started to build this skill set. We've practiced it. It takes time. It's not easy. But what are some of the results we might experience in our relationships and our connection?
Well, our work, our workshops, our week-long summer academy, our facilitator training, everything that we do is designed to be transformational for an individual to have that personal transformation of self-awareness, healing maybe of some of those harms and hurts that we've carried with us our whole lives. They can be from individual family incidences. They can be community level harms like racism or some kind of bigotry or sexism, homophobia, anything that's created harm in us and then impacted our way of being in the world. So our workshops are designed to be transformational. And so when individuals change, everything that they experience and see and do in their lives seems different. So when I show up at work, the employee who may have been driving me crazy for the last number of years suddenly, seems different to me or looks different. Or the client that I've struggled with, the relationship feels a little different. But that's because we've expanded our capacity, our individual capacity to be authentic, to speak our truth, to listen, and even to respond in a way that's moves more toward possibility, toward something positive, rather than those old messages of this will never be different and I don't like this situation, that kind of negativity. So the principles and the work at PJI invites us to our own transformation, and then we become agents of positive change. And that's by design. At PJI, we don't believe in spending a lot of time blaming and shaming or judging others, but rather doing that inner work of transformation so that we can be a beacon of light and positive social change everywhere we go. And that really starts to happen for people. And people just they start to associate their work with PJI as really integral to their life, to who they are, to how they lead in community and at work. So it's pretty powerful stuff. And we believe that by having individual lives changed, then we can have our personal relationships change. And then together we have the capacity to change our community. So it goes from me, the change within me, to the change you and I, and then to us. Because ultimately, it's about us. There's no other. There's no them or they or the other. To live on this planet, to sustain life for humans on this planet and other species, we need to come to the place where we recognize that it is about us. We're all in this together. It's a small little planet that we want to protect for our living space, and that we're going to have stronger, healthier communities when we see each other as fellow humans walking together, sharing all that we have, and really caring about one another.
I love this. There's so many things that just popped into my brain when you said that. First and foremost, I've said it myself. I'm very guilty of this, and I've heard it from others as well. If he would just, if she would just, right? Like we just want somebody else to change this action, this behavior, this thing about them. And it actually isn't about them at all. What you said here, I want to just really like pause on this for a second, is I show up differently because I'm now transformed. And so now I can hear you a new way. I can see you a new way. And I don't need anybody to change. I need to change how I'm seeing that person, how I'm experiencing that person. And in that space, out of love and curiosity and not judgment and bias, there's space for like actual real connection, which is what we're wired for. That was extraordinary. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think in a culture that feels divisive in so many ways, people have kind of taken their corner of the boxing ring. I think to be an individual among us who says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to otherize people. I'm not going to pick a fight. I'm going to stand in the center and find our points of commonality. We have strength in that commonality. And not to say that we ever want to dissolve our differences or our diversity. We don't. I mean, that's what makes humans so wonderful. Animals, we are diverse, and that is our beauty. And yet being a leader, an agent of change who can hold up the common good and see the common value of our shared humanity is what we need to grow. This group of leaders grow that capacity among us. And for those who feel burdened with a sense of maybe a hopelessness or fear, the reality is to transform the whole of an organism. That could be an animal or a body of people, a community. It doesn't take the majority to change. It really takes a small group of 15 to 20% who become these change agents who are working for our shared humanity. And with that small group, we can change the whole body of a community or an organism. That's really how it works. So when people say, sometimes they'll say, well, you're just preaching to the choir. And what we say, well, number one, the choir needs practice. And if we just grow the choir, we will get to a tipping point where we can change the whole of humanity.
It's so good. It's so good because sometimes I look at the world and I'm like, what are we doing? We're giving opinions instead of modeling good behavior, and we're pointing fingers and instead of finding connection points. And sometimes if I could be real, I'm looking at others and judging their situation and saying, well, at least mine isn't that bad, to feel slightly better about my mess in the moment, instead of looking at somebody and finding things that I can instantly love about them or that's beautifully unique about them. Gosh, I love what you're saying. And I feel like these scales are coming off of my eyes on what's possible, because we don't need every single person to be the change agent. We need enough people to say, I want to be the change agent. I want that kind of transformation for my own life, how I approach and see and love others. And then through that growth of myself, I'm giving permission to other people to show up in their full transparency and authenticity of exactly who they are, rather than who I've made them out to be in my little viewpoint of them. So good. Rachel, I'm going to ask you, can you share a couple of shifts or mindset upgrades that we could apply today on how we can improve how we show up to others in our community and in our world?
Yes. I mean, I think for me, when I got sober, I've been sober 30 years now, which is incredible, hard to believe. But when I got sober, I was living a double life. I was a very phony person and trying to kind of exude some kind of way of being to make you think a certain way about me. But it was inauthentic. So learning to tell the truth about myself, to be more authentic was very difficult. And it took me years because I thought, my gosh, if you know who I am, you know how much I cheated in school and lied, and just the behaviors that I exhibited, you wouldn't like me. What I learned is that it isn't, in fact, the awards that I've won that make people like me. Yeah. Because really, that's just not very interesting. It's who I am authentically and the struggles I've been through. I remember how it was so horrible to talk about for me personally, how much I had cheated in school growing up, even in college, because I felt so much shame. But as I learned about myself and I learned that, well, for children who grew up in very dysfunctional families, cheating is just a behavior of childhood adversity and trauma. And so I grew a lot of compassion for myself. And so now I talk about it because I know I'm not the only one who suffered these ways of being and really struggled. And I just want to be honest about myself. So I live in a biracial family. My children are biracial. My partner is Black. I had a lot of work to do around facing race. I grew up in a very segregated community that had literally railroad tracks and an east and west side that was segregated. So I learned though that if I'm honest about myself and authentic, that it's much easier to take than if I'm trying to be phony. So when I realized that I was in love with Willie Allen, a Black man, and I had all this internalized racism, I knew I had to face it and I knew I needed to be honest about it and that I wasn't going to be alone. So telling the truth, being honest, and in an appropriate way, in the right kind of settings. And certainly I have done work on these things to face myself. So it's not dumping these things on people, but just telling the truth because it does give permission for others to be authentic as well. We're all humans. We all have points of growth. So that's one. And I've said it, but I'm going to say it again. I think giving each other a chance to change. See it so much in communities, work environments or community where people say sort of what you said earlier, oh, that's just how they are. That's how he is. Well, let's give them a chance to be different. Let's show up with them in a way that they can also grow and change. And let's be surprised by their change and not try to keep people in a box. I think that's the challenge of working with people over so many years is that we do kind of box them in. So I've been so grateful in my own life to have sobriety, to grow, to change, to face difficult things about myself and know that I can be different. And I want to create that kind of space for other people because that's what we're here to do, right? To grow our capacity as humans, to love one another, to love ourselves, and to be positive agents of social change and ultimately to build peace among us. So that's important for me.
I love everything you just said. And your vulnerability gives permission for other people to feel safe being vulnerable. And that is an extraordinary extension of graciousness at the nth degree. It's just such a beautiful gift. And it's funny because a lot of times we're this perfectionist performance, awards, accolades, as opposed to like, no, my heart to yours. Let's connect. That's why people like you. And I love that you said that. It's not about your accomplishments. It's about who you are to other people. And that's why you're loved.
Thanks,
All right,
Chris.
Rachel, we are going to end with the Be the Change Challenge. So if there's one thing this week that we can do to improve our human connection, to see a conversation take place with people who think differently than us, anything like that, what would your challenge be?
I would challenge people to begin to notice the judgment, you know, just notice when we're judging others. and maybe turn to wonder. I wonder why I'm judging. When I got sober, I realized judgment was just so pervasive in my family, in my life, in myself. I started to notice why I was judging people. I noticed that when I felt insecure about myself, I started judging the people around me. That seems maybe that sounds very simple, but it was profound. Because when I was doing well and taking my personal risks and doing things that were challenging me, and I was focused on my own growth and being of service to others, I wasn't really judging people. So when I got insecure about maybe something I was needing to face or do, maybe something I was avoiding, suddenly my lens turned out on everybody else and judging the people around me. And when that happens today, I notice it. And I say to myself, Rachel, what's happening? You're judging people. But what I know today is to ask myself, what are you not facing? What am I not facing about myself? What am I afraid that I'm walking toward, that I've shifted the lens to judging others? So I think as we begin to notice the judgment and all that entails, we can really have some powerful change. And the principle I remember, I've been working with these a long time now. I've been working with these principles over 20 years. And I remember one time in a meeting talking about, well, I'm not supposed to judge. I'm upset with myself because I'm judging. And that isn't true. The principle says to suspend judgment. So we're judging creatures. It's what keeps us alive. It's where we notice danger and threat. It's built into our biology to be discerning, to have judgment. But the principle invites us to suspend it and to create a space between judgment and reactions. Then we can begin to listen to ourselves and to others more fully. So that's the practice. Notice the judgment and just suspend it and maybe get curious about why it's happening.
It is so deeply profound and wildly important. I can't even stand it. I am going to implement this immediately. And I thank you for that challenge. I think that's going to reshape how I approach every person, every conversation, just every next step, being aware of it. A lot of times we don't think about what we think about. So what an extraordinary challenge. Thank you so much for the work that you do at Peace and Justice Institute. Thank you so much for who you are in the community and also for giving of your very, very valuable time and insight today. I think we've all been transformed by this. And when we direct them to your website, you can find the principles there. I happen to have this gift from a thing we were at together, and I keep it nearby. It's a beautiful laminated pocket-sized thing that I can keep with me until it is deeply instilled in my being. But in the meantime, I'm still practicing and I'm still learning. So thank God for grace, right? Thank you for being here with us. I know that our audience has been affected because of what you've said. So I appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your heart.
Thank you very much, Kristi. I appreciate being here. Have a great day.
And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Peopling Podcast, and grab your copy of the Peopling book on Amazon, and let's keep this connection movement going. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep peopling like you mean it.